So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special webinar to launch the Data-Driven Governance Compendium, which has been compiled by CEGIS, but which is obviously a collective effort of everyone in this room and many, many people beyond. By way of introduction, my name is Mansi Narasimhan. I lead communications and strategic partnerships at CEGIS, and it's my pleasure and honor to have you all with us today, including some people I know who've joined from overseas. So probably good morning is in order and not good afternoon. Data-driven governance is a journey that we started last year with an event which many of you attended. We are immensely thankful to all of you for your participation, both at the event, in the compendium today, and going forward, because we do intend to continue this with a second physical event, which will be held in the second half of the year, likely in August. Thank you very much for this, and let's get straight into the proceedings. Before we formally unveil the compendium, I have the pleasure of announcing a short video which was not part of the official agenda, but a video message shared by a gentleman who really needs no introduction. That is Professor Karthik Muralidharan, our co-founder and scientific director. He's also, of course, the Tata Chancellor's Professor of Economics at the University of California, San Diego. Many of you would have either read his book or heard his podcasts. Could we just have his welcome message, please?
First of all, I would like to sincerely thank all the participants and partner organizations who attended the workshop on data-driven governance last May, who have contributed articles to the compendium, and who are participating in the event today. As you all know, using data for better decision-making is essential to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of policies and programs, and for thereby accelerating national development. Yet, as you also know, there are challenges in every step of this journey, from collecting high quality data at an appropriate frequency and unit of disaggregation, analyzing it and drawing timely insights, and then using it for better goal setting, progress tracking, monitoring, and course correction, and using it together for improving governance. These challenges are especially profound when it comes to how the government functions on a daily basis. And so the role of professional development focused organizations becomes especially important to facilitate this change. All of you have, in your own ways, walked parts of this journey, from data collection, data analysis, and data use in both your own work and in your partnerships with governments. And it's going to be incredibly important that this becomes a collective ecosystem level effort that is able to shape the use of data for better decision making and better governance. So thank you again for your participation. I look forward to learning from all of your experiences and to being part of this journey together for accelerating India's development based on a foundation of better data measurement and data-driven governance. Thank you so much.
So Karthik, unfortunately, could not be here virtually because he's teaching in California, but he did record this message for all of us. With that, let's get down to the main purpose of today, which is to launch the compendium on data-driven governance. And to do the honors and to talk of what data-driven governance means to CEGIS, I'd like to welcome the CEO of the CEGIS Foundation, Dr. Vijay Pingle.
Thank you, Mansi. So good afternoon to all the panelists and the participants. As we all know, governance at its core is about serving the people, and data is a powerful tool to make this possible. So in 2024, as both Karthik and Mansi mentioned, we had organized the first edition of data-driven governance in collaboration with several domain experts and partner organizations. And the conversations at this conference brought out two key takeaways. First was the potential of data use that is enormous and spanning every sector, every layer of government. But more importantly, the second one was that the issues are complex and interdisciplinary nature of the issues that necessitates the dialogue around this to be dynamic and evolving. So today we are proud to carry that conversation forward with the launch of the compendium that is named Towards Data-Driven Governance, Trends and Perspectives. This compendium brings together a wide range of voices. CEGIS team members and leading experts from across the ecosystem are contributing to that. And each article explores how data is being applied across domains, from education to health to behavioral insights and fiscal management. So I'm excited to officially launch this compendium through a short video. Please, let's launch it. So as I said, this in the today's launch, we are having these two themes covered in the panel discussions: the use of data in education and use of data in public finance. So I encourage all of you who have joined us virtually to engage fully in these conversations and share any thoughts and reflections that you have in the chat box. And we want to continue the dialogue beyond today, definitely. This is just the beginning of what we hope will be a sustained and evolving conversation around this data-driven governance in India. Thank you once again to all our contributors, all partners and CEGIS team members who brought this compendium to life. And now I will hand over to Mansi back to take us through the rest of the proceedings. Over to you, Mansi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for formally inaugurating the compendium. As Vijay said, we have soft copies. It's been sent out to all the panelists. We are happy to share with anyone who likes. It's a product for public knowledge. It will be on the CEGIS website. We also have copies printed. Should anybody want, please get in touch with the CEGIS communications team. We'd be happy to share it. As Vijay said, we have two panel discussions and one sort of keynote. But before that, just a request to everybody in the audience, please ask questions. We want you to engage with us, but please type your questions in the chat box and we will do our best, time permitting, to answer. But as you'll appreciate, it is a tight agenda. So please type your questions and keep the conversation going. Now we'd like to get straight into the first panel, which, as Vijay said, is on a theme that's close to a lot of our hearts, which is education. The panel is titled Strengthening Education Through Data-Driven Governance. And the moderator for the same will be the Engagement and Education Sector Lead for CEGIS, Ramnath Shankaran. Ramnath, request you to introduce the panelists and take the discussion forward.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, Mansi, and a warm welcome to everybody, both the panelists and the participants on the call. Today we have a really great panel of experts with their immense expertise in the field of education, governance, and leveraging data to improve outcomes. I'll give a brief introduction of the panelists, and then we can get right into the questions. We have on the panel for education Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, who is the CEO of Pratham Foundation, very famous for the ESSER reports, which is ubiquitous in the education world now. We have Dr. Jayashree Oza, who has immense experience in the field of education. She's a senior consultant and senior advisor to CSF. We have Namya Mahajan, who has worked in the field of education and is the co-founder of Rocket Learning. And we also have Anurag Vaish, who has joined us. He's an expert in the field of behavioral education and is the co-founder of Mensa. Right? Welcome all the panelists. And in the discussion today, we each of the panelists, just for the benefit of audience, have written articles with deep insights, which is available in the Compendium. We will try to touch upon a few aspects of those, but we'll not be able to do justice to the immense insights that have been provided by these panelists in those articles. So would strongly encourage you all to go through the articles and then engage with it. But in this limited time that we have, we'll touch upon a few key aspects of what articles that they've written. Having said that, first to Dr. Rukmini, in your article, I think you have written about making decisions more meaningful through participation and engagement with different stakeholders, whether it's parents or community or government officials, right? I think these are all very important stakeholders. My question to you, Dr. Rukmini, is what do you view as the role of community in providing educational outcomes, and how can data specifically help in this journey?
Thank you so much, Ramnath. You mentioned ESSER and you smiled, so I feel I must talk a little bit about how I connected ESSER to the article that I wrote. While ESSER is well known, what is less well known is that quite a few years of work prior to ESSER had gone into sort of figuring out how can involvement in understanding the situation on the ground propel action. And maybe the older you get, the further you look back. But I feel that some of those were very foundational learnings for us, in which I would say that before something becomes data, there is a tool, and then there is a method, and then that combined with some participation turns into data. And what we found in our early work is that when you produce a report, say, in front of a village community, or in front of any community for that matter, people feel कि वो तो आंकड़े होते हैं books के अंदर, there is reports which have lots of data in it, but not clear how it pertains to me. So if I say, India has a problem, you feel, okay, fine, there is another billion Indians, they can worry about that problem. If I say that, does this village have a problem? Even there you feel कि तो गांव तो बहुत बड़ा है, so lots of other people to worry about it. The way we used to do this pre-ESSER work was to create village report cards. And even the village we found at some level was too big. So if you went mohalla by mohalla, if you went neighborhood by neighborhood, and they're actually carried out to begin with, let's say, I am in a mohalla, I take out the simple ESSER tool, I start using it, everybody watches, they are curious, they want to know what you're doing. Then you see using the ESSER tool with a few kids, people get the hang of it. Very often people come and say, "Acha, kya hum bhi kar sakte hain isko?" Then you hand over the tool. So I think that this tool, this method, the purpose, often that doesn't get talked about as much as the actual data does. And what we learned from those early years of doing hundreds of village report cards was that the process of bringing together people to understand why you're using a particular tool. Of course, the ESSER tool is very simple. So in that sense, it's very easy to involve people. And then a couple of days later, after all the mohalla report cards are done, coming together in a common place in the village to talk about it, almost had everybody warmed up to the issue, to the reason why you were doing it. So the data then made sense. And one more thing I'd like to say, I'm sure we will go around and hear many more interesting perspectives. Somewhere, I think at the level of data digestion, I call it, where does the macro and the micro come together? Aggregate data seems very anonymous and very big and very distant. Whereas the data that you can see was created in your Mohalla report card that you may have even participated in, where you actually know some of the kids, somehow becomes much more meaningful and less difficult. Very difficult to ignore, because this is an aggregation of people you actually know, a process that actually you participated, and then you are much more willing to digest that data because you know it is authentic, it has been created in front of you, and move to the next step of what data wants to do, which is to lead to some action. So for us, I think that I feel that the more high level data we produce, we must balance it by a lot of work on the ground that helps people understand this whole process of how your reality can be sort of captured in quantitative ways, which then leads you to an overall picture.
Thank you, Dr. Rukmini. Can you also touch upon the role of parents in this? I know sometimes the community comes together, including the heads of village and all of that, but specifically around parents, how can they engage specific to the data on their children, understand where they are in the learning journey, and what can they do on that?
So yet again, going back to the example of the village report card, it was actually family after family after family that was aggregated. And when you were actually using this little oral one-on-one reading tool with the child, all family members were around. And the reactions ranged from surprise to sometimes real worry to I cannot tell you how many instances of grandmothers saying, Ki humko bhi karke dekho. I also want to see if I can do it. So engagement in that way, I think, is very important, because when you engage, you become part of the understanding and part of the solution. We have got lots of other experiences. For example, we work on large scale with Jivika, the Rural Livelihoods Mission in Bihar. And part of the program that we do with Jivika is in the self-help group, helping the women to understand what could be the learning level of her child or her child. After learning about it, A, she does activities with the child, B, she can talk to the teacher or the tutor and have something concrete on which to say, I know you as a teacher or you as a tutor are helping me with this, but what can we as families do? A final bit I would say, which is more recent, is the new education policy. This early childhood years from age 3 to age 8 is seen in very interesting ways, both as a continuum and also as a breadth of skills. So, for example, very often you think padhai is only letters and numbers and twinkle twinkle and things like this. But how do you bring aboard a large set of parents who have high aspirations for their children to understand that actually it is this foundational breadth of skills that really will make a difference? So we've been using a number of different things, and many state governments are also using them. One is to actually do what we call melas, in which in a mela, there is actually a booth in which you do cognitive activities, in which you do, let us say, pre-number activities where the parents and the children do it together. This is for children who are going to go into grade 1. And along with this journey, there is a visual report card in which the activity that you're doing and the level that the child is at can actually visually be marked. And we have found that this, again, it's the process, the report card, the tool, the conversation, all of which really helps this engagement and understanding of what I as a parent can do with my children to improve learning.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Rukmini. So it's not just data, right? Data is just a small piece of the overall thing, but it is the process of engaging with the stakeholders, getting them to understand, and it's the whole journey that gets the ownership done, and that's very important in terms of moving forward. Moving on to our next panelist, Dr. Jayashree. I think, Dr. H.C., you've written about the importance of learning achievement surveys and how critical it is for strengthening the programs, which we all understand, right? There are a lot of surveys, and those are really critical for us to understand where we are, as a country, as different states, and now how do we move forward? My question to you is, there has been a lot of challenges in the past in terms of now being able to run such large surveys, in terms of the time it takes, the resources, getting training done, and all of those things. But technology has made it much more simpler, faster. So can you throw some light on how has technology helped in conducting large achievement surveys?
So when we talk about large, I mean, India, we start with that. It is the largest in terms of population of the students, right? So large scale could be state level, district level is also equally large in our country, right? So yes. Now I want to focus on why are they important. So there are two levels. There are assessments of all kinds. Assessments are particularly, I want to talk about when they are at an individual level, it could be at a system level. When we talk about large-scale assessment, like National Achievement Survey or a State Achievement Survey, those are for system-level diagnosis, not at an individual level. So it does not directly impact an individual child or a school or a teacher. And therefore, it should be low-stake. We really want to know what the situation is. But often, because it's so large, and I think Rukmani started by saying collection of the data to organizing it, to analyze it, it's a huge mammoth task. So for example, as of 2014, in National Achievement Survey, for example, we've begun to use OMR sheets, right? Students give their responses on it. Those immediately get scanned, and those data files get transferred to further analysis. So that itself is so it makes it efficient, it makes it more reliable. I mean, there is no doubt about it. So there is less time, etc. Also less effort in terms of number of people, right? Also in the past, what we have tried, and in partnership with NCERT, and I was working at that particular point on these areas, we also looked at automated reporting, particularly when it's entirely database, such as to provide not only averages, but at group level, at a gender level, at a regional level, location-wise, in terms of. So you can provide results, and you're able to see what are the differences in the gender lens, with the gender lens or a social group lens, etc. So yes, tech can be beautifully used, and this is for children of higher grades from grade 5 to 10 I'm talking about. I also want to say CSF has an experience of working with smaller, younger children also using tech. So we used Tangerine, for example, which is it's a RTI has created this tool. It's used across globally, some about 65 languages, but we've been able to use it meaningfully at a state level. That's once again a large scale. So about 7 states we've used this, where data gets entered and these are one-on-one tests directly with one child. So those are very expensive to start with and time consuming. But with the help of the Tangerine, so of course you should, so the test is about 30 minutes. Normally it would have taken the same amount of task, it would take about an hour and a half. The young child gets tired, you don't want that. You want immediately those responses to be captured, and those could be immediately transferred. Most importantly, this is an offline tool, which can be used on a very simple tablet. So I think those have been used and used successfully a couple of times, like in Punjab, we used it twice, in a number of other states, in Telangana, in Tamil Nadu, in Odisha, most of these states wherever we work. So yes, the tech can actually increase efficiency as well as be able to provide for analysis, all of that. I think it's a very, very important thing. What is important, though, I do want to highlight this point, that everyone talks about assessment and frequent assessment. So states often have many assessments. The problem is, do we analyze? Analysis takes place. Even sometimes rewards take place. So where the schools or the districts or the blocks can get rewarded. But how do we use the data? So for example, in a particular state, so from 7% of children were at a particular learning level. It became 27, which is I think huge in terms of number. It's a huge gain. But very seldom we talk about why did 72% did not learn. And I think that is the use of the data and governance. So at a district, at a block, at a district, at a state level, one could analyze, and you will see in my, the article that I've written, right at the end, you will see competency-wise result being provided. You can see it very simple, red, amber, green, to say what percentage of students have not learned this particular skill. And those make it very user-friendly at all levels, at a school, district, block, particularly in development of materials, in curriculum, in terms of scope and sequence. Are we doing the right thing? Suppose you haven't learned fraction. Children, we find across the board in our state or our district that for grade 5 children, fraction has been difficult. We need to really look at our curriculum. Was the sequence right in terms of when they were taught? How much time was given? Were the teachers prepared for it? Is the material accurate? So the large-scale assessment can provide you insights into the material, into the curriculum, into teacher training, all of those. That is why they are very, very important. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dr. Jayashree. I think these are very wonderful points that you articulated. Moving on to our next panelist, Namya. Namya, you've talked about a very different thing, right? Use of transactional data. These are basically involuntary data that is being generated through day-to-day transactions. And you also talked a little bit about tech as an enabler for some of this transactional data, right? So while some of these techs are still evolving, right, whether it's blockchain or satellite data or something like that, can you share some examples of what are the things that are in the realm of possibility on what can we expect of what can we do now versus what can we do in future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think just to start with, I think we're all aware of, Anganwadi workers and in general frontline workers in India, right? They are responsible for ensuring the quality of delivery of almost every scheme, right, at the ground level. And they're responsible for generating huge quantities of data, right? So they have some 14 registers, they're collecting 150 indicators or so, right? About 100 of them for every child, which is some 60 kids in their supervision. So, they have these two ginormous tasks, and those tasks don't really talk to each other, right? I think the theme, with, across all three of us is that, can that data really be used by the person who is generating it so that it leads to, better delivery of services, right, for the people that we care about. So in that context, I think the idea is, can we use transaction data? So every Anganwadi worker actually in almost every state is provided a smartphone by the government. Most of them are also given data packs by the government. They use an app called the Portion Tracker mostly to record data, right? But there are now nascent attempts to use that data and analyze it and provide it as actionable data for the Anganwadi worker. So talking about how this can be used. So one is, say satellite data, you can get the location of households, of kids. When you're going to that child's house, right, and you're doing a postnatal visit, say at, you're supposed to do 7 of them in the first 3 years. So you're going at 3 months, you're going at 6 months. You get a very simple set of 2 or 3 questions that for this child, last time, they were starting to go below their height weight norms. So could you suggest something related to nutrition, or, for this age group, this is the correct early stimulation activity that they could do, right? So things that again make it very simple and actionable, reduce the cognitive load on this person who is, deeply overburdened, right? So that, they can use it. Height measurement is not easy. I don't know if any of you have tried to measure a baby's height. They squirm, they sort of, they don't sit still. So, is there a way to actually take a picture and have that be sort of, given some kind of range of error, right? So that reduces again the time that, the Anganwadi worker takes on that task. So I think just thinking creatively about how can we not make the data measurement and recording burden. How do we make that data actually actionable for every child, for every Anganwadi worker, using everything that we have at our disposal? I think that's the crux of it. And some of these things will take a while to happen, but I think that's how we should be thinking of using these, not for getting more data points. There are lots, if you add a data point, you must reduce a data point, right? But how can they actually be used for improvement of quality and service delivery?
Yeah, that's an important point, right? We should just not keep adding to the burden of teachers or Anganwadi workers to just keep collecting more data. How can we get it from sources that are already available and know that how can we leverage that? But I understand these are early days on this, but we need to keep pushing the boundaries and explore more. That's wonderful. Thank you, Namya. Anurag, you bring out a very different perspective, right? We all keep talking about data, numbers, and you're saying, no, these are not good. You need to look at behavior and you need to tell stories with the data that you have. Can you tell us more about it? What is it and how does it help?
Yeah, I mean, that's my bread and butter, right? So happy to talk about it. Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Yeah. So I think Rukmani was mentioning, right, that, we have this metadata and then we kind of keep moving it backward into a context, into a village, into a family, right? So story is nothing but data sample of one, right? So you could talk about one village, that's a story. One family is a story. One person is a story, right? And so there is this general understanding that metadata is making less and less sense, right? And we need to kind of bring it down to some level of contextuality where it starts to make sense, right? And to me, sense is nothing but feeling, right? I mean, there is no dearth of data, right? Namya just spoke about transactional data, and I was thinking at what pace it's getting generated, right? I mean, I'm sure they're turning out gigabits of data every day, right? And there's a time when people are talking of big data, and I nowadays hear people talking of small data, right? And I love that idea that, in design thinking, we talk about divergence and convergence, right? Which is go explore, but ultimately come back home, right? So you can diverge as much as you want into data, but ultimately you need to converge to a story. Otherwise, the feeling doesn't happen, right? And to my mind, what Rukmani was saying was exactly that the idea of data is not analysis, the idea of data is action. And these decision makers are no different from you and me. You and me also cannot act without feeling, unfortunately. I can make you deliberate about things and run your logical brain, ad nauseum. You will be able to make no decision, zero, unless your emotions come into play. Now, as data analysts, our job is to get the emotion into play. I mean, it's not that data itself cannot be emotional, right? I mean, sometimes data can be so dramatic, so drastic, so painful, or so happy that you can get emotional about it, right? But unfortunately, we are all working in sectors where data itself is not necessarily crying or smiling, right? So to say, so we've got to make them cry and smile to some extent, right? So to my mind, that's the important part. And the counterintuitive fact is that, we keep thinking that this big people like data. If you were to trust me, right, data works at the lowest level. At the highest level, the only thing that works is intuition. If you can align with the intuition, it works. I've worked with enough CEOs and I've worked with enough health workers in Africa and all. Health workers you tell them data, they'll buy it. Right? They'll buy it, right? Because, their decision making is not very complex. Right? The problem is that as decision making gets more complex, the more the incapability of our brain to make sense of data. Right? So you need some heuristic, some story to start getting vivid and start getting impactful, right? At the base level, right, people are not making that many complex decisions. So you're telling an Anganwadi worker, first, please collect data honestly. It's a simple decision, right? Now, you're not telling a bureaucrat sitting at the top or a politician at the top saying, collect data honestly. Right? You've got like 10 different vectors that he has to deal with, right? So the more complex things get, the better feelings work. The less complex things are, the better data works, right? So if you're buying potatoes, please use all the data possible. If you're buying a car, please self-drive it. The data is not going to be useful. You test drive it, you will know whether you want to buy a car or not. But if you're buying potato, please figure out where it came from, what is the price, what is the transport cost. No problem. You will still make good decisions, right? But with a car trying to make decisions with data, you won't make good decisions. Nobody makes good decisions on a car by data. They make good decisions by driving it when you get the feeling of it, right? So all I'm emphasizing is you guys are working with governments, you're working with the top of the ladder. These guys are very, very intuitive. They get it. If the data is telling the right story, they will get it. Problem again is they'll ask for data. I also send a lot of data. At Mensa, we work with young adults, right? So my clients are VCs and deans and so on and so forth, right? When you ask them, they'll all say, I want a dashboard with all the data, this, that, whatever else. I give them everything, they never go there. When I send them a story in an email, it really reads. Then again, they'll meet you and tell you how they want data. But they only read stories, right? So you have to kind of deal with it, I mean, that's the effectiveness of it. There's a difference between what people want, what they like. I like working with what they like rather than what they want, because often what we want is quite misplaced, if that makes sense or not.
That's great, Anurag. Thank you so much for those inputs. We'll again circle back to all the panelists with another question. Would like to request you to keep it all short so that we can wrap it up in a few minutes and probably have one set of a few questions from the audience as well. And I do see some of you are answering questions from the audience. Request the audience to keep posting questions. We'll try and answer as many as possible on chat or here, right? Dr. Rukmi, you've also lucidly written about the improvement in child's ability serving as a powerful tool for motivation for the teachers, right? Because if the teacher sees a child blossoming in front of their eyes, it obviously serves as a big motivating factor, right? Now I'm trying to see how we can combine data towards this. Seeing one child learn or do something is different from a teacher seeing data on, okay, this is where my class was at the beginning of the term or year, and this is where together as a class, or these are the outcomes in which they've improved and all of that. How do you see this difference as what I see in a child versus how can I use data to motivate the whole class improving? Can you share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm taking off, I think, maybe from what Anurag just said, that, what is it that motivates whom and to do what? I think it's important to understand that and give that right combination of fuel to people to add. And I was, while you were speaking, I was thinking some years ago, we were doing a program in partnership with Punjab government called Padho Punjab, and where the basic goal was to get all children to be, being able to read basic text and being able to do basic arithmetic operations. And some months into this program, I remember visiting a school in Gurdaspur or somewhere, where when you go into the school, firstly, I noticed that the children were quite welcoming of a stranger. Very often primary school children are a bit, hesitating, and they don't know why you're there. And so I asked the kids, what do you like? Do you like reading or do you like math? And the whole class, not one child, the whole class said math, Ganit. So I said, okay, shall I give you an easy question or shall I give you a difficult question? And I think it is such an enduring memory that in a loud voice, many children said, Vadda Vadda Sawal De Do. Now, this to me was an indicator that whatever had happened in this class before, it had given the kids, not one kid, but many kids, the confidence to say to a stranger, challenge me, let me see what I can do. Now, if you looked at the data of that class or a data of a class like that, I think the real challenge for teachers is this combination of individuals and the full groups and the full class. The learning crisis, as it's called now by somebody important, must have called it that, World Bank or someone, is really the variation that a teacher has to face in the class. So if you look at any data, ASER data or NAS data, you'll see that there is a big band of differences across children in the class. And the teacher has to deal with this variance. Now, at one level, how she looks at these different groups improving, what is the strategy she uses for the different groups, She can do a sample check, like you pick up a grain of rice from a pot to see if it has cooked or not. The complex task that a teacher has to do is how do you understand how your class is doing based on some things that you do with some kids. And I think very good teachers work this out in a very good way so that you get a sense, you don't have to do it every day, but every week, every 15 days, get a temperature check so that you can change your strategy to move forward. The whole learning crisis, I think, it's sort of like you are in a low level equilibrium, which is not moving. A teacher is working hard. Let us assume that, like anybody else, most teachers want to do a good job, but they often teach from the curriculum of that grade, which is what you're taught to do, right? But when I teach fifth grade from the fifth grade curriculum, if I've looked at the data, I know that more than half the kids are not, even 2 or 3 grade levels behind. Second is you look at parents. Parents say, बच्चों को school भेज रहे हैं, but I don't see any change from 4th to 5th. कि क्या हुआ? And the most important character, I think, is the child, because think of a child who's been in school for 5 years and is still struggling to do basic things. By that age, by age 10, you have internalized that there's something wrong with you. Hence, I think that this being able to make progress using methods, effective methods, is very important because it unleashes the child's progress, one child's progress, 10 children's progress, the class progress, which then fuels a very positive feeling for the teacher that she is responsible for having created this progress. And all of this is supported by parents who understand that there is some progress happening. So I do think that this is, all of life is about what I think Anurag was calling one story and a multiple of stories. Because my class as a teacher is really, I'm successful not when 2 of my children come first and everybody else fails. My real success is when the bottom is lifted up and then some children go much higher. And I think an eye to watching this progress is very important because, as we say, nothing succeeds like progress. As soon as you've taken one step, you want to take 3 more steps. And so how do you encourage that for individual children, but also for a group?
So one child at a time, one story at a time, right? Makes. Moving on to Dr. Jayashree, I think, Jayashree, in your previous response, you touched upon the data that is needed at a local level, right? Not at a block level, district level, school level, for them to take actions based off of that data. Now we do see a challenge, right? Now there is at a local level, school cluster, block levels. The assessments are not always standardized. It is now coming in from the teachers. So there is some questions on the fidelity of the data that you are trying to get in. The block and district officials don't have fancy reports that are automated that they can quickly look into. While the large achievement surveys, they have good quality, standardized and reports and all of that. They're not available at a local level for the block officials to look at how is school A doing versus how is school B doing and things like that, right? So how do we resolve this or how do we bridge this gap? Or not, do we need to bridge this gap at all, right? Should we just let it be and see how we need to deal with this?
It's very interesting, the lens with which, this particular question. So you will be surprised that number of secretaries at the state level have initiated it, particularly in the last 10 years, a lot more. It's slowed down a little bit, but we want census data, all children, all schools, everything. I do want to say there are differences. See, there are assessments of all kinds. One is, I think what Rukmani was talking about just now, we talk about a classroom level assessment, right? A teacher does the assessment. She's able to figure it out. There are these 5 children here, 3 children here, and 8 children are here. And in that learning trajectory, and what do I need to do for different children, right? So that's a pedagogical tool that you use. Assessment is used as a pedagogical tool, right? That's for teacher to know. So sometimes I have smiled and asked, with my age and everything, I could take the chance and tell the secretary, what will you do with it? You get, let's say, 5 lakhs children's data altogether, even in one subject, in one grade. Aap kya karoge? And very often, so the thing is that very often you do need the data, but we have to really classify to say at what level, what kind of data is required. So I'll come back to your question, Ramnath, in terms of at a district level. Let's say I got a district report card for National Achievement Survey, which is, we said, a standardized tool, etc. Given that everything is great quality, we assume that. In that case, at a district level, you can analyze, once again, I said large scale data is for system to say, are my materials good? Are we doing enough training? Are we providing enough time? Even in the training, are we telling the teachers that some of these things will need more time for children to practice, for example? So even at a pedagogical level, you can do that. So once again, going back to my article, you will see those posts. If it's a district level data, you can see where do you need to do more work, right? So yes. However, do we need data at the school, at the cluster level? Yes. Because if I find that in my 20 schools in my cluster, almost all children are not doing well in a particular skill, then in my district level, or sorry, cluster level monthly meetings or so, we can have teachers for math, for example, and actually thrashing out that particular competency to say, how do we teach? There are out of 20, there are at least 2 teachers. I'm sure they're teaching it really well. We can, so this cluster coordinator knows which teachers are doing well. He can make sure that those demonstrations are done similarly. So I think in somewhere similarly at a district level. So should the same
Dr. Jayashree, we lost you.
to say any training that you're doing on pedagogy, you should start with the insights from the assessment and say, these are the things our children are not doing well, how best we can do it, which can include, the stories, the data. And actually, I want to come back to what Anurag said. The great assessments are a combination of the data and the stories. That makes it really a powerful tool to, because even with secretary, I can talk about data, but I would also give 1 or 2 examples of how this data gets used, how parents are receiving it, or how a teacher is used this to do this, things like that. And that is really powerful. So I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, very much. Data with stories is my takeaway, right? Yeah, I think that is really important. Moving on to Namya. Namya, you've talked about how using of administrative data to do performance reviews, right? That creates perverse incentives for people, and that goes into a vicious cycle of having poor quality data and all of that. What then is the mechanism to do reviews, and should reviews be done at all? How do we do those reviews if we don't have sufficient data, or if the data starts getting, for lack of better word, corrupted when we start to use them for reviews?
Yeah, I mean, a review itself, you make it sound like such a heavy thing, right? Like such a, that conflict is inevitable, right? And I think that is the way. I mean, it's used really as a bludgeon, no? Matlab, uh, and in some cases it's like whether the data has been collected itself is a bludgeon. Not even is it high quality data, not sort of have you acted on it, but is it there at all? So I mean, can we reimagine what a review is, right? Can it be more of discussing that this is the current status and what can we do to support you to do this better? Again, these are people who have more responsibilities than you and me. They have harder lives than you and me, and they are getting barely any support. We send digital certificates to Anganwadi workers, and they will print them out and put them up in their Anganwadi center. That in 30 years is the first time I've been told I've done a good job, right? So that never happens in a review. Data is never used to celebrate or to congratulate, right? In the normal course of things, right? So I would, stress on making reviews better, sort of coaching people on giving better feedback, on, creating supportive conditions that can actually make people do better, right? I mean, and also, to be completely frank, we can't promote really many of these frontline workers. We are not firing them, so what is the point of demotivating people based on data when you can't even take sort of significant corrective action for a large number of these people, right? So as Rukmini said, we believe most people want to do a good job. If they're not doing a good job, can we help them do a better job rather than, just harping on the fact that a good job was not done?
Thanks, Namya. We have to definitely reimagine reviews, right? So that's the key word that I'm taking away. How do we go away from our current way of doing to appreciating, supporting, and motivating them during this process. Moving on to our last question from here before we take maybe a couple of questions from the audience. Anurag, thinking of narratives, right? You talked about stories and how can we do that with data. Or how we need to do that with data. But how can we scale this, right? Look, I can write one email to the secretary or to a few people, taking in some piece of data, take some examples and do that. But when we are looking to do it at scale, where now you're looking to engage with so many different officials, so many different teachers, or teachers engaging with parents or community, or different people engage with their stakeholders with data, how can we enable some of them, many of them, to use stories along with data?
Yeah, I find it a little strange, right, that you asked this question, because I think data analysis is far more difficult than story writing, right? So if somebody could sit down and analyze, gigabytes of data to make sense, to write a two-line story should not be that difficult, right? It's more of a habit. And, I preach, I don't necessarily practice, right? So when it comes to really doing something, there's so many times I'll shortchange the story to show a table, right? It's just how we think of our audience, right? Even though intuitively we know that that's not necessarily true, right? I think some good habits are required, right? And I think Jayashree was making that point sometime back around that 70% data, right? And I think we need to learn how to write the median story, because our general tendency is to write the outlier story, which is not true. Right? It's an outlier to begin with, right? And generally stories we think have to be outliers, right? So when you're writing a median story, it may not be exciting because the outcomes, inputs may not be as exciting, right? There may not be a hero and a villain in the classical terms, right? But that's where I think the importance of the journey begins, right? I think Rukmani was mentioning that sometime back, which is, data is all about input, output, outcomes, right? But what happened in between? It was a journey. What did the student do to kind of get to that place, right? That is motivation, right? And then I know you were talking about, somebody was talking about motivation, right? A motivated story is one that fills somebody with some sense of agency, right? That I can do it, right? And if you can't build agency, then there's no point telling a story. Then you're better off telling some data. Right? And again, Namya, you were talking about good, right? I mean, what systems can exist without being 9 goods to 1 wrong? It's impossible, right? Those systems would crumble if there were 4 wrongs and 6 rights. It has to be 8 rights and 2 wrongs, right? But somehow we become used to this idea of telling negative stories, right? To me, it's very, very important that we appreciate what is good, right? And a lot is good, unfortunately or fortunately. Right? As researchers, we may not like it. We want to kind of bring out all of those really bad vectors, right? But a lot is too good. And something is wrong. And to my mind, that agency also comes when you talk about all the good things and then seep in one negative thing. Because the good thing builds agency, right? That we did it. And without agency, what's the point of story? Right? I mean, what's the point of telling a story where nobody has any learnings to take home or nobody has any action items to take home, right? So I think to your question, right, I think it's not as difficult. I think data analysis is way more difficult. Data understanding is way more difficult. Data dissemination is way more difficult. Story writing is easy. We are all naturally inclined to storytelling. My mom to my grandma to my daughter to me, all of us are good at stories. On data, only my daughter is good at data, right? We are all pretty bad at it, right? So story writing is a natural habit. We just need to get to it. We just need to tell ourselves that we need to get to it. That's it to my mind, right? Yeah, I don't know if I answered it or not, but
yes, absolutely. Very wonderful points. As we are now getting near to the top of the hour, we do have time to take one question from the audience. And I'll slightly rephrase this question and I leave it open to the panelists to answer that. So the question is around, there is so much of data that is available, right? Now we've talked about large surveys versus teachers and Anganwadi workers. They are collecting data from cluster resources to whatever, right? Now everybody is collecting data, but we don't see, and there is a lot of analysis as well happening, right? But we don't see so much in terms of use of the data, right? So what are the key bottlenecks or challenges or behavioral changes that we need to do to enable the move away from okay, now collecting and analyzing data to taking action on data, taking action using the data that is available? I'll leave it to the panelists if you can chime in.
I could go first if you like. And so it's a great question. And one of my major issue around is data does not get used. I think there are two things. One is we are unable to associate stories with it, which people can relate to it. So if the data improved from 7% of children learning to 27, how did it happen? What happened? What did teachers do differently? We don't create stories around it. Secondly, our advocacy is really poor. Government, by definition, does not advocate anything, right? Unfortunately, even when there are great stories. So there are some rare examples that when a secretary really publicly announces that, look, while we are failing, but this is something really has happened well. So in state of Madhya Pradesh, that did happen. It was really celebrated. And so media picks up the stories as they see it without, because people are unwilling to share it. So that's one. I think there was another question on terms of how can we have face-to-face so many sharing and it's not possible, no, we can have videos, we can have, virtual conferences to say this data will be shared. Your children or your school will come to know something different. We're not using communication, advocacy, and stories to actually highlight the stories or the findings which come out from these assessments. And I think that's what probably definitely needs to be done.
I can add here. So, for example, we believe a lot that there is a level above the teacher who is a really important level. That level could be block people, mandal people, cluster people, depending on the state, it could be different. When we do programs, let's say in partnership with the state government, we always say that those are the people with whom we need to work first. In Pratham terminology, we call them leaders of practice. So I'll give you an example from UP. UP, 75 districts, 120,000 schools. You start off the program with 300 people, 4 people from each district. You spend some time together in training, figuring out what is to be done. And then we would say कि 3 हफ्ते के लिए आप अपना खुद daily class चलाइए on the things that you've been oriented on. During that period of 21 days, we make sure that we visit each and every one of those. Anything that is done in that period and it seems effective to the leaders of practice, then we'll roll down when it goes. So if I come to data, in this period, this was a big program in about 2018-19. The difference between the baseline and the end line in 20 days was 20 percentage points. But it was talked about a lot. Ownership was discussed that, the actual, in that case, that person was a teacher before they became the leader, that I did it. We saw in the cascade that exact role modeling then went to the next level and went to the next level. And in addition, there was another thing that if you are a leader of practice, then you will do first, then you will train your teachers, and then you will support them. If you can align this kind of behavior, then the chances of whatever is the pieces that you do, whether it is data, whether it is effective teaching, tends to follow through. Very often we go directly to the frontline worker without doing the steps in between, where the people in between can see the impact of whatever it is that they are practicing to do before they take it to their next step.
Yeah, engaging stakeholders at all levels. I'm relating it back to your first thing. Now, how do we engage stakeholders with whatever that they're doing, and that really brings in the ownership and the drive for them to run this forward, right? Thank you so much, all the panelists. We are at the top of the hour. I'll hand it over to Mansi for the next session. But before that, I would really encourage all the participants to read through this one, right? So we couldn't do justice to the depth of the content in the articles that these people have written. So I encourage all of you to read through, and then you can also engage with us through the emails and stuff that can be provided. Said that, now handing it over to Mansi.
Thank you, Ramnath, and thank you to all the panelists. It was wonderful hearing all of you. Just reiterating, any further questions in the interest of time, please mail us at comms@cegis.org. We will share responses from the concerned panelists on email. Moving on now, I'd like to welcome our next session, which is again a very interesting and sort of a unique conversation that we'll have. This is about driving capacity building through data. And to talk us through it and share a few words, I'd like to invite Dr. Unnat Pandit, who's the Controller General of Patents, Copyright and Trademarks, Government of India. Dr. Pandit, welcome, sir.
Thank you. And it was quite an enriching discussion which was happening, and I was thoroughly involved in this discussion and trying to map what we are doing and what has been discussed on the data. Are we aligned or not? And that was quite an interesting learning which I had. First of all, we are a different office. The way typical government office operates, we have altogether a very different framework to operate, and Vijay and the other team members know, because we have been in this discussion for almost around 2 years. We have to evaluate the applications with respect to the intellectual property, innovation, and these are the key driving force for our country to take the leadership position while we want to aim achieving the Viksit Bharat in 2047. And in this entire journey, we have thought of evaluating each and every phase of our operations and activities, and where the officers have the issues in dealing with certain specific kind of cases, applications. And I thoroughly enjoyed the interaction with CEGIS during this time frame, and then this relationship has played a critical role in India's journey towards the building a self-sufficiency in the IP innovation space. We all aim that we want to achieve the leadership position in the IP innovation space, and the data-driven capacity building initiative and the performance monitoring initiative has played a critical role in our office output. And I must say that we strongly believe that there is a need for a change in the IP office, the way typically the government office was working, and the way we have built the each and every level organization role, and how the officer should be performing, and in which technical and administrative matter the officer is facing the deficiencies. And this is completely monitored through one dashboard which we have created with the help of CEGIS. And this dashboard was offering the review monitoring of the officer, in which typical legal action, the officer has a difficulty in taking the decision, difficulty in analyzing the subject matter, and how to overcome with this. And to overcome with this, we have offered the IGOT learning opportunities. And we have tried to best utilize the efforts which we have collectively built under the mission Karmi Yogi for our office. And I must submit that in last 2 financial year, we have a 1 lakh institutional learning hour. in IP office. And 50% of officers have completed more than around 40 courses. And in 23-24, 41,000 learning hours were completed by 960 officers, which is almost 99%. And 65,000 learning hours were completed in 24-25 by 1,400 officers. We have designed the Bauddhik Agaman training for 500 new examiners who are joining the office. And they have been given the capacity building opportunity because they are good at the technical aspect. And our functional role needs the technical and legal aspect. And also, when they are joining the government office afresh, we need to give them the exposure in the administrative matter, CCS rules, RTI rules and regulations, all sorts of holistic development which we are required to plan on almost around 16 different modules. We have planned a 16-week of training. And beside this, we have aimed that each officer who has joined the IP office during this 16-week complete at least 60 hours of a training. And to my surprise also, we have overachieved the target, and the average is around 61.5 hours at the end of a 16-week of training. And this is not just a data. We have utilized this and assessment which we have carried out along with the IGOT also 70-30 ratio. And in this ratio, we have done their posting. And more than 98% officers got their posting of a first choice. Because at the very beginning, in the first session, they have been given the clarity that this is how their training is going to be monitored. This is how the data will get generated, and this is how it is going to be evaluated. We have also tried to bring the evaluation using the AI metrics. We have tried to create a baseline assessment, end-line assessment also, and for both the sides, we have collected the data. So where they were in the baseline assessment, where after 16 weeks of a Bauddhik Agaman in the office, we have the clarity, and now this will be mapped quarterly during the 2 years of a probation period. And we have introduced a mentor-mentee initiative also. So with each 4 to 5 trainee examiners who are now the examiner of patent and design probationers, and along with this 4-5 examiners probationer, there is a one assistant controller level officer who will guide them during these 2 years of their affiliation as the probation period, so that they are absolute having clarity that what as a quality we want to achieve, what as a volume we want to achieve, and what is the need for our country when we want to build the IP driven technology knowledge embedded economy. And now with this data driven capacity building, we have aimed at how we can map this with the performance management system. Like we have experimented for their posting, the performance assessment and the data, and how the baseline assessment, end line assessment of a 16-week of training, and 20 months of their affiliation with the IP office. I think this will set a new benchmark in the office. And we have more than 99.8% officers enrolled with the IGOT. And the way role-specific learning opportunity we want to offer them, that is helping the office in reducing the pendency. So if I may say that by 2014, we were granting 6,100 patent application with overall around 8,000 disposal in a year. by end of 23-24, we have granted 1,03,000 patents. And in last 3 years, we have got a 3x jump in our output. This is the intervention which the capacity building and learning opportunity which we have, which my office has offered to these new officers and the existing officers also who got promoted. The patent filing increased by 3x again. 42,000 new applications we were receiving in 2014. We have by 2022 we were receiving around 55,000 applications, and by 2024 end we have a 110,000 new patent applications received by the office. The applications which were required to be expedited, on that front, average time taken before 2022 was roughly around 6 to 8 years from the request for examination. And out of 9 in 14 subject specialty, we practically have a zero pendency with less than 36 months of a disposal time. See the way we are, at least in this 9 subject specialty, we are better than the international norms. This is what the capacity building initiative, technical skilling, grooming, and motivating them to up the training courses through IGOT and the physical training also. We have aimed that at least 80 hours of a physical training each officer will be required to have during the course, during the calendar year. And almost around 65 to 70% this is being adhered. We have launched a WIPO and IPO driven LLM program, so that there is a career progression to the officer, and they have a better and improved legal understanding. And the barometer for this, I don't judge just by the data and the number. When we were granting 30,000 patent applications, the decision which is challenged before the different high courts were roughly around 400 in a year. When we have granted 1,03,000 patent with the disposal of 1,26,000, the decision challenge before the court got reduced. It is a 365. So 3x reduction in the decision which is getting challenged before the High Court. And on many decisions, the court is upholding the decision taken by our officer. So this is what the capacity building of the techno-legal officer is playing a pivotal role in transforming the IP office. We are now working with the different global South offices and sharing the best practices which we have offered. Currently in Hyderabad, we have 7 countries examiners and Indian examiners undergoing 2 weeks of a training. What practically we have done during this last 3 years, that is being shared with the 7 different countries. In the South Asian countries, African countries, Gulf countries, and many global South countries also. So this is how we want to share this. This is a big motivation to the officers, and it is helping us transforming the entire IP regime, and certainly the administrative gain for the office also. So this is what I thought of sharing, the actual example which we have practiced during the last 2 years with the help of CEGIS team, and we further have the much enhanced goals for the next year also. By the way, we have the annual capacity building plan which is being monitored with the help of CEGIS, and we have the active capacity building unit also, who is helping me in monitoring on real-time basis. And they are doing, apart from the regular work, they have the additional charge of executing this annual capacity building plan also. And for each and every role, we have the bound booklet of their objective of their role in the organization, their responsibility, and their deliverables also. And this is being monitored on real-time basis on the MIS dashboard. Similar, like the corporate is monitoring the output and outcome of the employees, we in the government have opted the corporate governance model. And through this MIS, we are monitoring this on real-time basis. So anytime, and data visualization also has been made accessible to the public. So whatever I am monitoring, any individual who has an interest in IP can see the real-time data of output and applications which we have received. Every day by 10 p.m., the data is getting synced. And this is visualized by on our website, ipindia.gov.in. So this is how we have thought of bringing the transparency in the entire administration and improving the overall output and outcome for our office. Thank you, Mansi ji and the CEGIS team for giving me the opportunity to share the live test case which we have implemented in IP office, and that has helped us in transforming the entire culture of IP office. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you,
Namaste.
Dr. Unnat. I think we are a little behind schedule, but I think we'll all agree that the discussion is really engaging. We'll quickly move to the second and the last panel, which is on how data shapes public spending. And moderating this panel is Devashish Deshpande, the lead for the strategic public finance vertical at CEGIS. Devashish, over to you to introduce the panelists.
Right. Thank you, Mansi. And I think great sessions before this. I think I got some food for thought in terms of how do we do this. Unfortunately, I think it is. I mean, while it is a pleasure to have the panel that we have today, I think it is also quite tragic that we will have to insist that they share their insights in fairly short period of time. But we will try and cover as much as we can. So let me first start, I think, by embodying that brevity and keeping the introduction short. So let me start perhaps with Mr. Keshavan Srinivasan, who is a former civil servant, previously the Deputy CAG of India, and now is a senior advisor with Janagraha. We also have Alok Rajan, who is a senior program officer at the Gates Foundation, who leads the state capacity and public finance initiatives there. We have Vaishali Samanta, who is the chief operating officer of Vedis Foundation, which looks to use a lot of this data in terms of their grant making. We have Prashant Chandramoulishwaran, who is director and lead for public finance at the e-Governments Foundation. And we have Karan Nagpal, who is the India director for ID Insight, a firm which, of course, all of us know, works extensively with data and research. Let me start maybe with the macro picture first, Srinivasan sir. I think maybe we can start there. So you talk in your article about how rare it is for governments to actually use information on data, really hard data for budgetary decision making. But you also point out that the Finance Commission, in particular the Central Finance Commission, is a bit of an exception to this rule. So just if you could help us understand how do they manage it? I think especially in the context of horizontal devolution, where there is likely to be a lot of political pushback. The question perhaps is twofold. One, of course, is, in terms of the formulae that you use, while they're formula based, it is very easy to look at the same indicator in two different ways and therefore benefit one state versus another. And two is, I think, what really happens, because at the end of the day, all budgeting is a political process, as it must be with the Finance Commission. How do they balance the requirements of both equity and efficiency? I think just want to understand from your article and your experience as to how you would think of that.
Good evening, and a pleasure to be there. Thank you for having me. I will make the point that Finance Commission is perhaps one of the prime examples in government of data leading decision making. Usually what happens is, before IT came in, the data was too voluminous to be converted into information and then converted into getting into the decision making matrix. It is not that people took decisions by pure intuition, but they were abstracting the data by themselves and taking the best case scenario. That used to be usually, and data was used later on to, when the data came in later, it was used to explain the decision. It was not data-led decision making. Data explained why you took a certain decision. But Finance Commission, on the other hand, is an example from right from the first Finance Commission to today. They were using a formula to decide. Finance Commission's basic role is to distribute resources. One, to decide how much will go to Government of India, how much will go to states. That's vertical devolution. And then from what is there for the states, how does it go to X state and Y state? How should Karnataka get what share and Tamil Nadu get what share, and so on. As Devashish said very rightly, that horizontal devolution is politically a hot potato. It has a lot of implications, and you've got to strike a balance between equity and efficiency. How do we do that? Initially, the first finance commissions started with pure population and area-led approach, and slowly it started getting more and more sophisticated. It'll probably do some good to describe how a typical finance commission operates. Finance commission has, besides the members, it's got a secretariat, and it also commissions studies. To my mind, most of the finance commission does three things. Every state prepares a huge memorandum, very well prepared memorandum. It's almost like an investor going and doing a pitch. So a pitch book is prepared by every state. Then every Finance Commission extensively consults with all stakeholders by making a visit to every state and meeting all of them. Most of them give a sectoral view to them. And Finance Commission commissions independent organization to study the macro economic picture of a state and takes in data from there. Apart from that, obviously, it consults every ministry, of every stakeholder of Government of India. Besides that, it engages a lot of organizations to work with them to give them the data. It also takes a presentation from every state accountant general and what he thinks about how the finances evolved during the 5-year period. As a guy who had a 360, I represented before Finance Commission as a AG. I'm now working with Finance Commission, Janagra, doing a research project. I was also with Maharashtra preparing a pitch book. I find that everywhere, each one gives my view, my organization's view, and the Finance Commission is in the difficult position of trying to integrate and look at the whole and take a decision and come out with a formula. Usually the formula gets into a lot of, because every step, every decimal point counts, it gets into a lot of debate. But having said it, they're trying to balance two things. That also brings to another point which I wanted to, you see, data usually gives a view of being very deterministic, of being very, very it's yes or no, it's kind of, you're there or not there types. But Finance Commission's formulas cannot be that. It mirrors public policy in the sense it's a difficult decision where you've got to balance competing interests. So they give some this thing to equity, which is their basic role, while looking at the population, while looking at income distance as to how underdeveloped a place is. It also gives a nod to the good work done by a particular state in doing population control, which is a national objective, by trying to say that I'll give you for demographic performance, for reducing the birth rates and improving every other demographic indicator. It gives some points for that. It also gives some point for fiscal efficiency in managing stuff, and then prepares a formula and on the basis of that allocates. While you can have arguments about whether I agree with this assumption or I agree with that, you cannot argue with the fact that Finance Commission's determination at the end of the day is entirely data-led. It is not colored by any other view that they may have. They bring out a formula. use the formula consistently for all the states, and there you have it, probably the best use case for a data-led decision in Government of India, at least till date that I've seen.
Understood, sir. No, that's super helpful. Unlike perhaps the conversation that we were having previously in terms of service delivery, it does appear the data is useful even to the top leadership in context of public finance. But let me then zoom in, Vaishali, a little bit to sort of come back to the points that were being made in the previous session, which is that data is more likely than not going to be useful sort of for the micro decisions at the front line. And in many ways, I think that is where we often find the barriers in terms of really making the more sort of allocation driven decisions at a very micro level for particular purposes, rather than the sort of grand scheme of sort of devolving funds across different governments, etc., etc. Just wondering, in your experience and in programs that VEDIS has been running, where do you think have the issues been? I mean, in general terms, in terms of why this sort of data often fails to become actionable, especially when it comes to sort of these micro decisions. You mentioned in your article examples from Sushakt, and I think our audience would benefit if you could just speak a little bit more about that, perhaps, and help us understand your experience there.
See, micro level decision making to one thing is governance is a fast moving reactive job. While the planning and policy making might at the macro level might be a job which gives you the luxury of time to think and make a decision. You will have former bureaucrats here, Vijay and all would agree with me that they've got to react immediately to a developing situation. So unless you have very good data quality, you have online streaming of data which comes in, it's very difficult to wait for data to do it. Sometimes you need to get it right. Even with great brevity, I'll try and take 1 minute to give you an example of a micro level decision which had huge implications. It's an actual thing which happened. You know, there's winter stocking of food grains into Northeast, where the limiting factor is chicken's neck, and it can take only 1.5 train loads a day. So you've got some 45 days from the harvest to the winter to stock the places. And 1 year it was not stocking up, the stocks are not building up. The chief minister of the northeastern states are going to the prime minister and complaining. Nobody knew why. Railway, everybody started saying more lines, better train management, all kinds of fancy technical decisions were taken. My boss decided saying, let's go there and see what stops trucks from going up Siliguri. We went there and found out that a new SP had come to Siliguri district. The road to the Seven Hill Sisters goes through the Siliguri's main street, and he had decided that there's too much of lorry traffic going. So he banned lorries from going up from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That had implications like stopping the winter stocking and getting the chief ministers to talk to prime minister. So it was a micro decision at its best to stop heavy vehicle traffic in 2 kilometers of a city road with huge implications down the line for various things. So data, administrative data, it could be accounting data, speed, accuracy, and availability at that spot is a huge requirement for data-led decision making, which was not possible in previous days because of technology constraints or other things. Now, with all the technology that we have at our command, probably it is time that we lead with, we go in with more data-led decision making, even at the micro.
Understood. So that's super helpful. And we'll, of course, come to data quality and technology later as we speak with Prashant, Alok, and others. But Vaishali, maybe coming to you now, just to sort of understand your experience in the context of Sashakt, and obviously other thoughts that you may have in terms of where the failings are for using data on micro decision making.
Yeah, thanks, Devashish. I think the government has a lot of data, and I still believe that there are issues in data quality, but still there's a lot of data still exists within the government. So while I leave the issue on data quality, because that's something that can be taken up as a session separately, but I think more in terms of coming in with terms of design. So I would like to look at it as one, a design element. Second is the capacity constraints, and third is the workflows. I think in terms of design, there is a lack of standardization, right? The methodologies that we use for every department, and we work very closely with the rural livelihood department. Now you have rural livelihood, you have the Panchayati Raj department, same set of households, different set of data, and we can't somehow kind of triangulate and get it together. So every department is collecting its own data. So it can there be that standardization is something that usually becomes a big challenge towards getting the data and trying to make it more actionable. And the design. So usually data is collected for, say, a survey, a purpose, and then the data, how do we then take nuggets of that data and use it with some other data to bring in intelligent insights? So that is a challenge. Second is the bit that I talked about, capacity constraints in terms of limited resources in being able to collect data properly and accurately, and capacity constraints, I think, in terms of expertise. Who's going to really analyze the data? Who's going to triangulate data? And who's going to action that data? So there are capacity constraints at every step along the way. And that's where I think building state capacities come in, a big part that even CEGIS is working towards, and you would understand it to all of us here on this forum. The third is also, workflows. How do we really improve workflows in terms of when we're really managing? Can we look at it to make it more citizen-centric and more beneficiary-centric or more end-mile-centric rather than for the need that we have? So can we have interoperable data systems? Can we have interdepartmental convergences to look at data systems that can then match and bring insights which can be useful to multiple data departments that are involved? So I think that the first question that you asked was, Devashish, in terms of from our experience, how can we make it a little more actionable by the government? One is, yes, we sit and we analyze the data. But is it a one-time analysis, which kind of addresses a one-time need? Or are we trying to bring in findings that will go over multiple departments, multiple use cases, and multiple reasons that we can go ahead? So I think that is what is very important. Taking in, and you said to go a little more with our example of Sashakt, right? Like in terms of, so Sashakt, for everybody's information, I think it's a knowledge assessment tool. We said that the government has a lot of community functionaries. Can we have a knowledge assessment tool and to see that, what are the knowledge levels and how do we then bring it to make it more decentralized, more need-based? And from just assessing knowledge, it turned out to a tool for governments to build in more efficiencies in budgeting, because nearly 30 to 40% budget is for trainings and capacity buildings. So it is shifting the entire process to make it more grounds up, more decentralized, more data-driven, and obviously more need-based. So it becomes an ask rather than a give. So when we were looking at these community institutions, what you call as cluster level federations, it is about how each institution within a district is doing. So you don't have a blanket training plan that is across every institution in the state or every institution across the district. How do you really look at decentralization? What it also moved the needle towards, and that was very interesting, and a part of what we found out along the process, was we were it went on to address the root cause. Is it a problem with trainer efficiency and training efficiency, or is it a problem with retention that is happening? Which means that, what is the frequency, how are trainers to be paid, which again builds into budgeting process. So, it is about moving the entire thing to lead to targeted planning. Targeted planning towards is the same budget, is the same institutions, is the same women, is the same trainers. What we are trying to move it towards is, can we make it not a one size fit all, but break it down into individual nuggets which will address specific training needs across each of these community institutions?
Just to follow up, how would the decentralization? I think one of the most difficult things with decentralization best practices has been institutionalizing them. whether sort of it is in the form of replication and standardization across different units, or whether it is really even in terms of persistence of that particular system after, let's say, a certain entity has moved out and so on. How are those challenges sort of, I mean, how can we, I'm sure we haven't quite arrived at the solution yet, but how could potentially we look at that problem and how could we sort of create some safeguards so that our solutions sort of, one, are standard across different jurisdictions in a decentralized context, and also perhaps persistent beyond a certain point.
Thanks, Devashish. So essentially, I mean, at the heart of the public finance problem that we're talking about is, as they say in government, the ability to match the physical and the financial. You can think of this as information on physical events or activities flowing one way, and as a result, finances flowing the other way. But if you look at the broad context in sectors like health and education, you will see that there are multiple funders, the government being the biggest of them, plus multilaterals, et cetera, who all put money into this system, which in turn will fund employees, frontline workers who work in service of citizens. So this is the information flow, right? As physical information flows, financial flows will happen towards the other side. The challenge is due to the vast number of stakeholders and the interactions that they have. There is a lack of visibility in the information itself that leads to high cost of coordinations. It's largely because different data systems are not able to talk to each other. This creates in turn a host of different problems for different stakeholders. For government departments itself, you don't have timely information on revenues and expenditures. You're not able to forecast or build estimates or take appropriative, allocative or policy decisions. Administrators in the system have a high burden in spending a lot of time and effort into making this linkage between the physical and the financial with data that is not trustable. For frontline workers, or for, if you look at the procurement system for businesses, they don't get paid on time, and there are service quality issues as a result. All of this really happens because data is not trustable and the chain of custody is not clear very often. One way to get to the standardization that Vaishali spoke about is, implementation of data standards. We do have certain data standards in government, but the implementation has been fairly variable. Simply put, data standards are a language through which digital systems can talk to each other. But because we don't have strong data standards, data as a result becomes not interoperable. If you look at the spending side, issues really stem from two critical places. One is the multiple levels of approvals, and the other is sort of fragmented systems, very often within the same department. Both these challenges really arise because granular trusted data is either unavailable or it lacks verified audit trails. What we really need to do is adopt a digitally signed and standardized data protocols that can ensure trust and interoperability in the data. By ensuring that both fiscal data and service data is able to flow seamlessly, you can have some of these approval issues sort of sorted out. And that's really where data standards can help, in addition to principles that we've spoken about, including unitary data of capture, as close to the primary unit of activity as possible, single source of truth, once only principle, machine aggregation. There are examples of some of these happening, but I can come to that later in the session.
Maybe I would love to know a little bit more on the once only principle, Alok, because as you said very clearly, I think there is a fragmentation in terms of the jurisdiction and the responsibilities of different people who are then entering that data separately. So how easy or difficult do you think this once only principle? And firstly, if you could just help the audience understand what that really means, and how easy or difficult do you think in any particular given context, whether in terms of service delivery or any other government provision, how easy or difficult do you think that is to implement?
Yeah, I think, theoretically, once only principle is very often looked at in literature from the citizen's perspective, so that, a citizen has to share information with the public service delivery system once and not, enter that information multiple times. But there is a inside government flip side to that, right? Every time a citizen is sharing information, there is also an administrator on that other side processing that information multiple times. So while the once only principle can ensure that it makes lives easier for citizens who only have to share their data once, but it also brings down the administrative burden on officials, and in certain systems can also ensure that the chain of custody of data becomes clearer, by linkage to registries, etc. Multiple governments, for example, in state governments in India are looking at a family ID system, where essentially they're using that to map the individuals in a family as a unit and use that to figure out, based on certain terms and conditions, what sort of public service delivery schemes they're eligible for, what they're getting and what they're not getting, and using that information as an administrative tool to push government departments to do better in timely service delivery and sort of scheme delivery to citizens. At this point, efforts are ongoing in Andhra Pradesh, Himachal, UP, amongst other states. But again, it comes down to the quality of data and the trust in data that these systems have. In one state versus the other, you can have data systems that have very different levels of quality, and it then enables you to target citizens in varying different levels of efficiency.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Prashant, maybe then I'll come to you. I think as an extension, I think we spoke about data quality or really even reliability. And in your article, you talk about how real-time transactional data would really make that difference in terms of just taking care of some of those issues to a large degree. So just wanted to sort of probe a little bit on that and understand, when you say real-time transactional data, what does that really mean, firstly? And two is, do you think that's really applicable across all sectors, or is it sort of certain types of services or certain types of fiscal transactions where it may apply, but others where it may not? So both the limitations and the strengths of this system, if you can just speak a little bit about it.
Sure. Thank you, Devashish, and also congratulations to CEGIS on the publication. See, real-time transactional data, as the name suggests, actually it's quite straightforward. It's a real-time digital record of a physical event happening. Like, say, a citizen interacts with the government. Now, in this interaction, they can be said to transact something, and hence that is a record that gets created when it's digital. It's called real-time transactional data. Now, see, the interesting part here is when on the path to good governance, we're talking about ensuring that the right data is available with the right people at the right time. And Alok kind of spoke to that also, that information and money have to flow in opposite directions in a seamless manner for things to actually be smooth. The RTT data in that sense is very powerful, because for this endeavor of ensuring data is available with the right people at the time they need to make decisions, it's generated firstly by systems, transactional systems that do the job for you. So if people simply do their jobs, this as part of their administrative process, this data will be generated and there's no additional burden on that. So if you look at data that is generated and recorded like this, so when we capture every event in the service chain, whether it's a beneficiary being registered, or whether it is an infrastructure work being measured for completion or not, or fund dispersal happening from the finance department against a particular service that is happening, RTT data inherently is more robust, reliable, and complete when compared to manual data. So what it means essentially is it is verifiable, and that generates trust. It is non-repudiable, which helps deliver accountability. So I can't say that I didn't do a transaction. I cannot deny it. The system actually has a log of it. And it is observable in real time, which means if I'm an administrator sitting at the department monitoring probably 115 cities that are executing a particular scheme, I can actually know and understand what's happening in each city at each project level under a particular scheme. And that ensures predictability at every step of service delivery. But beyond technical advantages, of course, in RTT data, what its true power lies in is shaping behavior change. So when you have trusted, non-reputable data in front of you, what changes, right? can officials move away from their defensive post hoc reconciliation kind of mode into a more timely, confident decision-making mode? And this is what we saw in Odisha, and I can speak to that a little later. But yeah, so these three main advantages, but a couple of more, if you sort of take a side step, because it emerges from administrative processes, what it also saves, and hence it is transformative in that sense, is time and money that is lost by academic institutions, think tanks, philanthropies, because these are the organizations that are working with the government as extended capacity to be able to do a lot of this study, understanding, assessment work, etc. So it's a substantial cost to the exchequer or philanthropies, and this can be reduced vastly when we use the data generated by the system instead of actually creating data sets again and again. And finally, I think RTT systems are also helpful because they don't just capture the outcomes. They show you what's happening at every step of the process. So revealing where optimization can actually help or whether it is required. You may have a lot of non-value adding steps. And then when you see that as digital records, you can actually start pointing out. So this is the granularity that helps governments actually identify bottlenecks in their process, to fix them on the fly, because often, I think like Srini mentioned that they don't have the luxury of time. So fix them on the fly and then improve how money actually translates into better public services. So in that sense, RTT data doesn't just support better public spending. I would argue that it makes it possible.
Right, that's very helpful, Prashant, and hopefully we will have time to come back to the Odisha example and speak about it in a little more detail. But Karan, let me come to you. So if we've been talking about the technical efficiency of expenditure, and obviously that has implications both on the micro and the macro allocations. But when we talk about budgeting basis outcomes, outcome-based budgeting is something government of India has been pushing for a while. Most states are, many states now have some form of an outcome budgeting statement. But what does it really mean in practice? And where do you think sort of things don't quite shape up? Where you may, firstly, you may not have the outcome data in the first place, and you have to sort of therefore decide the indicators. But where do you think is the difficulty in sort of combining that financial and physical data that Alok was previously referring?
So when we think about when is data used or not used, it's almost come up with based on our experience, a three-part framework of capacity, willingness, and availability. And so, data is not used because either it is not available or because people don't have the capacity to use the data that is available, or you may have capacity and the data is there, but there is no willingness, and willingness then we break down into intrinsic and extrinsic incentives. So for the longest time, I think availability of data is something people have spoken about a lot. And so I think in this type of framework, I see Alok and Prashant's interventions in the context of cost of availability. Data may be available, but once you build these digital systems, you can get this data pretty frictionlessly, fast, real time. It takes a one-time investment in that sort of data system, but then availability becomes easier. And so one of the constraints that we have and many other organizations have seen is that even though lots of data is there, it's not getting used because, even if there's willingness, they will say, it's not it's all fragmented, it's not coming together in one place. We can't interpret this in an easy way. And so I think that's where it comes to availability, sort of, reduce investing in digital systems that can make this available in a way, not just available, but available in a way that, it makes sense, you can make sense of it, you can interpret it, you can make it decision relevant. That's the availability part. I think and that's what we, in our partnerships with several planning departments around the country, Delhi, Telangana, UP, have been doing, is making data available, either existing admin data or through, in Telangana, for example, survey data. Then comes the part about capacity, and Vishali spoke to this point, right? Capacity in terms of time and bandwidth, capacity in terms of skills. I think those constraints exist. I do think, though, that the willingness ends up becoming the most binding constraint in at least my experience. Wherever we have succeeded, in these states, even success, even in terms of setting up the partnership, so that, at least they're committing to something on MOU, so we at least start working. Even there, it has required a lot of intrinsic motivation and mission-driven bureaucrats who want to do things in a particular way. So, there is that sort of desire to say, okay, look, the government can be better. We recognize that the status quo is not working. And so there is that intrinsic willingness to start. I think one of the things we have over time learned is the importance of extrinsic incentives. Intrinsic incentives can only last so long. So people will get transferred, governments will get changed, personnel will get changed, and even if they don't get changed, their own priorities change pretty quickly. And something that we've all heard in governments, right, is that when we start working, we say this is going to take about 6 months and they want it in 1 week. And so patience runs low. So intrinsic incentives are good to start with, but then you need some modicum of extrinsic incentives to actually shape change. And I think that is one part that we are all, I think, as a sector on learning journey towards figuring out what set of extrinsic incentives is optimal. In the previous session, Namya was speaking about not using performance data for reviews. I don't know whether the binding constraint there is that data was used for reviews, or was it that data is not being used in the right way to diagnose problems and fix those problems. So I definitely think there is I really hope the message shouldn't be that we should not use this performance data for reviews, because you need to do something about the problem. But yes, I agree that there is a world of investment required in thinking through training people and creating the people who are making those reviews, right? They should have the right set of incentives to use the data for problem diagnosis and fixing, and that is not the case today. I think something else that we have all been, we have been exploring in ID Insight, but also in many of our conversations with people in this room, is the idea of citizen accountability and how do we shape that. I think Rukmani ji in the first session spoke a lot about making people realize that this data is about you. It's not about the country, it's not about the district, it's not about the village, but this is affecting you and your child and your health and your road and your sewer that you need outside your house. I think that is something which would be quite interesting to explore further. And how do we use a set of incentives to shape sort of so that citizens and the elected representatives that they elect, they themselves are the ones demanding this level of accountability. That look, you are making this decision, you're allocating X crores towards a particular scheme. Is that genuinely having an effect or not? If it is not having an effect, let's diagnose why it's not having an effect. It's not a binary of, okay, this is not working, so let's close the scheme. It's about, okay, does this needs, is there another bottleneck here? Is there, maybe we're not investing enough. Maybe, you can't, you need 100 crores to build a road. You can't put 20 crores in that scheme and say, no, why is the road not built, or is it the case that, yes, genuinely, this is not, we may be doing everything possible to move the outcome, but maybe our interventions are not sort of moving that outcome, and we need to go back to the drawing board and think about what will actually improve the outcomes, which I think in India comes down to a lot of the anemia reduction interventions. I was thinking about really what will systemically reduce anemia in this country, and so I think a lot of the constraints that therefore we have, faced in terms of starting off, but then not actually achieving the holy grail of at that data point, that high quality data point, either through a sample survey or through a digital system, through data exhaust, that data not getting used for these. It's used a lot in terms of to improve scheme performance, it to improve, whether the scheme scales up or not. And at that level, it's used, and it's used because there are intrinsic incentives of people in charge to use that data. But really, this higher order thing about how do you build a culture so that the whole sort of machinery, sort of citizens, civil society groups, political leadership of is asking for that accountability. I think it's something that still that work remains to be done, so that when outcome budgets are released and maybe there is 1 or 2 days of coverage about what the government is claiming in that outcome budget, I don't often see that becoming a matter of public discourse of saying that, look, you are claiming this, can I audit your claim? Can I actually say, oh, you are saying that XYZ was done but it was not done in my village? How do I negotiate that, and how do I therefore use that to sort of move towards the right thing? I think in some states now this topic of underspending of budgets is getting a lot of political salience and attention because media is talking about it, because it shows up in newspapers that spending is low, spending is high. And I would like to see a similar sort of engagement, and I think we in this room, it is our responsibility to shape that discourse so that the right questions get asked, to which the wisdom in this room, on this call, in the sector has the answers. But I think the challenge now is how do we get the society as a whole to ask that right set of questions, so that we shape the willingness to use data when making these decisions, to build capacity to use data when making these decisions, and to build capacity to make that data much more easily available in real time basis.
Yeah, thanks, Karan. I think that in particular, I think last part which you spoke about, the citizen asking for some of this information and really using it is really at the crux of it, isn't it? I mean, the budget is really the statement that the government presents to the citizen saying this is what we intend to do. And that then brings me, unfortunately, we have very little time, and it is truly tragic that we've barely been able to scratch the surface. I would request Mansi to maybe do another sort of follow-up session for this, but perhaps we can come to that later. So let me place a question to the entire group. And I think this question comes from both the accountability side as well as the data standards piece, as well as the utility and the capacity of the government. It might sound slightly provocative, but this is really more about the current systems and how do we navigate them or change them to work to our advantage. And here I refer to the current approach to sort of documenting financial data, right, which is your head of account system, etc., etc. At what point do we think that, or are there certain aspects of it that we need to change or we need to improve, which would make it easier for people to understand the budget from a citizen's perspective, and frankly, to use it from a government's perspective? Because one knows for a fact that many of the line department people who are actually trying to build their budgets are unable perhaps to comprehend this, and it doesn't necessarily align with what is needed for them. So let me maybe put this out to the group, but Srinivasan sir, given your sort of association with the CAG, as well as your involvement in sort of working on this chart of account, etc., etc., just wanted to understand your views on this as well.
Debashish, did you ask this question to me?
Yeah, you to start with, sir, but I'd love for everybody else to weigh in on this one.
Okay. See, I think while I understand the angst in the question that you need better intelligibility of government finances, I would think that we have enough technology these days to represent the data in easily understandable ways. If you look at, in fact, I used to tell them that the best reports in government are produced by non-governmental sources, whether it's VIDI or PRS. I mean, the kind of summaries they come out informs even government guys. If I need a quick one pager, I would rather look at it than look at one of our own documents. So I think that rediscovering, getting into accounting standards, a chart of accounts thing, it's a very long route towards making data intelligible to users. I would really leave it to outside experts like maybe eGov or one of these people to take up the job of reducing it to a level which people can make sense out of it and use it. That would be my answer. I've been the chair of Government Accounting Advisory Board. I would think that if I do it, I'll make it it'll become like what happened to the Income Tax Act. The new act.
That's very modest of you to say so, but maybe then I'll move to Prashant and Alok to maybe ask the same question. How do we navigate this chart of accounts, especially when we're looking at capturing things like where money was spent and so on? Of course, one knows that there have been reports which advocate including further accounting heads, but as it currently stands, especially given what sir is saying about the use of technology, have you sort of had to face this problem? And if so, how do we sort of work with that? And maybe Alok, you could start and then Prashant.
I think Prashant is much better placed to answer this question, so I'll hand it over to him.
So,
Sure.
Devashish, could you just quickly repeat the question?
No, so we were talking about how the chart of accounts obviously sometimes is so complicated that makes understanding the budget difficult, much less actually doing any actual budgeting. And Srinivasan sir's point was that rather than try and awaken the beast, perhaps better to use technology to really help people navigate it.
So
And I wonder if
the core is actually getting citizens interested about the budget, right?
no, even the
Or
government,
is
for
it
that
even
matter,
the
even the
government?
line, yeah, even the line departments finding it more usable. Let's say I'm trying to budget, and I have to then sort of retrospectively fit it in some line item somewhere, etc., etc. Is there a way that technology can bypass that issue and sort of help both the decision maker as well as the
Okay.
consumer of that decision to sort of understand?
So, in one way, I think of late the conversations even around the PEFA have been around, how do you tag for climate, how do you tag for gender, etc. And can financial systems support it? But even before we go into some of this, just bare minimum on the chart of accounts. Lastly, what we have seen is that it's very hierarchical in nature. So it always has to follow a particular sequence, and maybe it doesn't have enough information about some of the attributes on the who, what, where, when, how of financial and service information. So one of the things that we have done at eGov is to develop a specification which Alok has mentioned in the publication called iFix, which actually talks about granular information that can tie fiscal and service events. And we actually lead to a more multi-dimensional chart of accounts, which allows for then, slicing and dicing in different ways. Even when you prepare the budget, it gives you that level of opportunity to actually clarify that this is in this particular locality, these are the beneficiaries who will be receiving the ultimate advantage of this government spend. This is the source of fund. Here is what we're planning to do with it. All of that. I think beyond some of the things that happen today, if we can go to micro level attributes, that could be one way to sort of solve for this visibility / understanding challenge. And then just have a very clear terminology around what it means, because sometimes often what, say in some cities, when we were in Odisha and some cities, we found out that some of them have taken some steps to mitigate for disaster, disasters that hit the coastal cities. But what they've not really done is think of it as a climate response, or they've not tagged it appropriately. These kind of things can actually, again, there's a little bit of capacity element, and then there's a little bit of how do you have protocols that can help from the technology side.
Thanks, Prashant.
Yes,
please.
Quick, see, government has already decided on a revision of chart of accounts, including a lot of other dimensions which are not presently captured, has been ready, and it can be used on a computerized system, but it has not yet been approved for use. Having said it, there are ways in which to capture the time, place of an expenditure using technology and add it to the core chart of accounts and the amount, which is one thing, the technical side of things. Other thing is to make government reports, rewrite government reports in simple English, which is intelligible. There was an effort which was taken by CAG about 10 years back to produce naughty books, what we used to internally call, the naughty comics, which is used for children. That kind of this thing was to produce a naughty book for every audit report to explain everything in 10 pages. That also is a increasingly, a graphical novel, a new format that people use, even a reel of which explains a particular concept. That is probably some of the efforts which innovative people can look at to make government information intelligible to citizens, because ultimately is intended for that. The others are only incidental pass-through people. Only it should reach the citizens.
Right. So firstly, thank you so much for empathizing with my angst and sort of giving me some degree of comfort. I'm sure that all the people working here on this group, I think, will continue to work towards improving these systems and making them more useful, really, for the citizen at the end of the day. I think that's what really matters. I am going to sort of hand it over back to Mansi. I think we are slightly over time, but Vaishali, Karan, Alok, please, any closing remarks? We'd love to hear from you. Of of course, as I said, Mansi would request that we reconvene this session sort of at a more opportune time, and then we maybe go into some details as well.
I just had one response to your
Yes, please.
last question, is that one is, of course, technology and the use of technology, I think, but one important aspect that we need to think is about the openness to change and looking at, managing expectations, co-creating those solutions so that we don't add to the administrative burden, and that is where I think we will need to look at it slightly differently as technology being an enabler rather than adding on to the existing burden. So, and which is where I think the philanthropy sector largely comes in to kind of do pilots for alternates, which will not add on to your existing system, and then the state takes it on. So possibly that is another approach that could be looked at in terms of managing expectations, understanding the process, and minimizing, and of course, the behavioral change, nudges, all that are part of the play. But how do you then move this to embedding it for sustainability?
Absolutely, completely agree. I think it's important to also teach people to swim when you're drowning them in all manner of data. And perhaps, yes, please, Karan, sorry, you want to add to that?
And to make them realize that swimming is in their benefit. I think all of this is in service of the people who it is meant to do. And I think, for us, it's very front and center important to keep that in mind. And genuinely, if something is not solving a problem or helping, people do their jobs better, to move away from those solutions, ourselves also, because not everything will work. And I think being open to recognizing that some of the things we do are not going to actually solve problems, I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Alok, any final thoughts from you before we close?
Yeah, maybe just a 30-second response to Vardhan's question on, is it wise to reform existing structures or create new structures to push the reform? Neither is easy. Here, I want to make another plug for data standards. So if you got data standards right and you started publishing this in every RFP for a new system that any part of government will build, then you provide a pathway for a state or a national government to eventually have some semblance of systems that can talk to each other, rather than sort of trying to only reform new or build entirely new ones. Over to you.
Great. No, thank you. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining and for making a subject that not too many people find particularly interesting, fairly fascinating, and hopefully we will continue this conversation as we go along. Mansi, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Devashish, and thank you, everyone. Yes, I don't think the time allowed us to do justice to this. We'll figure out how to continue this very interesting conversation. But since we are over time, I'd just like to request Sriharini Narayan, the Telangana State Lead for CEGIS, to just deliver a few closing remarks, bring together this conference, and we'll wrap up with that. Over to you, Harini.
Thanks, Mansi. I think it's been a very, very engaging discussion over the last 2 hours, and I'd like to thank all the panelists, the moderators, and the participants for sharing their thoughts. One big takeaway for me, and I think for CEGIS, is the fact that underlying all the issues discussed today is data use. And what is the behavior that we actually want changed at the level of a child, at the school, for a frontline worker, at the citizens level, and across various levels of the government, right? So, and then underlying all of that is the intrinsic motivation and the willingness to use data, the incentives that exist. And of course, the role of the technology as an enabler, and the role of the civil society, us as organizations who are, using data for our own campaigns and advocacy and work, and also in engaging with the government and driving this systemic change that we want seen. So as we start planning for the second edition of the DDG, the Data Driven Governance Forum, we would keep all of these in mind. And I think we have a lot more points to reflect on, and look forward to continuing this conversation. And thanks once again to everybody and to the communication team and the knowledge management team within CEGIS for having put together this compendium and also convened this event. And thanks to the panelists once again for your time. Thanks all, and see you at the DDG 2.